Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm Minhaj. I run Drinkwell. We enable utilities to serve people who live beyond the pipe. And so what we bring to market is a resin that can remove heavy metals like iron, arsenic, fluoride, and it's a hybrid ion exchange resin, zirconium loaded, so it can recover 99% of water. It lasts 10 years. You have to do sodium chloride regeneration every 2 to 3 years. Utilities, particularly in Bangladesh, and we'll double click on Taka, actually have, so Dhaka actually as a megacity has 32 million people, of which 4 million people live beyond the pipe. Because these people don't have pipe water connections, we partner with these utilities through public-private partnerships to deploy water ATMs so that these utilities can legally serve these beyond the pipe communities.
Thank you, Manoj. That's a helpful look at the need on the ground and how decentralized systems actually help to close that gap. So Maria, turning to ADB's perspective, ADB was designing a water infrastructure project for the city of Narayanganj. What made decentralized systems a priority, and what gaps in service coverage were you hoping to address?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So, as you said, we were designing an investment project with the city of Narayanganj, and traditionally ADB invests in centralized systems. But we were seeing a huge need in the city, and as Manoj said, there are a lot of people that live beyond the pipe. And so, although we had financial constraints, we really saw what was happening in the city in terms of there are women and children who were time poor because they were going and collecting water and spending also more time away from like other economic pursuits, time with their families, care obligations, away from education, in order to boil water and spend more money on energy sources to make the drinking water safe. So we really wanted to address that need. And we wanted to do it and had to do it in the financial constraints that we had. So that's when we met Drinkwell in 2022. We were introduced to them through the Bangladesh local government ministry. And by this stage, I think Drinkwell, we have been working with Dhaka WASA already for 5 years or so. And I think developed over 250 water ATMs in Taka WASA, which for context is just next door to Narayanganj, which was the city we were working with. And so for ADB's perspective, I guess what was attractive was because we saw that this was not just a theoretical solution. We saw that it was working and working sustainably in a next door city. However, we still run into challenges when we're trying to deploy things like this, and very validly the city council wanted to make sure that specifically for them it would work in their local context. So that's when we partnered with Imagine H2O through ADB's also accelerating innovation and digitalization program, so that we could pilot 2 water ATMs in Narayanganj, and so that really proved the scalability of the system and also the fact that it could be implemented in that specific context. And so that meant that the city really was more invested and felt confident. And so as a result, actually, this month, ADB has approved a loan with Bangladesh, and that will include water ATMs in the investment project.
Nice, thank you so much, Maria. So to kind of summarize your answer, Drinkwell wasn't just a standalone technology. It was already a proven last mile service model. So Manoj, I'd like to come back to you on what it takes to actually scale to a new city. So, you know, as we've mentioned, Drinkwell already had hundreds of ATM deployed across Dhaka. So despite this, why is it still so hard to scale to a new city, even in the same country? And how did partnering with Imagine H2O and ADB help to de-risk that process?
So the best framework I heard was 3 criteria to ensure scale. So the first is the easiest, which is technical viability. The second is somewhat easier, which is over time, bankability. But the third piece is institutional achievability. And for a startup to convince a utility to adopt a new innovation is quite the Herculean task. And so we needed the cover, the might, the convening power of the ADB, who really can sustain through changes in government. Tariffs are very political, and so anytime you kind of have these kinds of very, let's be honest, political dimensions to scaling innovation like prepaid water in a constituency that had never seen prepaid water before. We really needed that kind of third-party convening lender who had that authority to back us. And so that was the key, and thanks to Imagine H2O, we were able to connect with the right task team leader, the project officer, the innovation team, to really architect how we could go about going from a meeting with the mayor to getting clearance from the city council. And now, thankfully, we work with every utility in Bangladesh.
Thanks, Manoj. So I'm hearing that even with proven technology, aspects like financing, local trust, and execution still matter for scaling. Maria, my final question is for you. What would you say to other DFIs or city governments about the value of collaborations like this within larger infrastructure programs?
Yeah, so I want to back up with what Manoj was saying. Actually, convincing utilities and also convincing ADB is a Herculean task. We are traditionally very risk averse. So what I would like to share is that, too often when we have social enterprises or philanthropic funding, we see that they are funding models and service delivery models that are outside what traditional ADB is funding in terms of to utilities and to bigger governments, and we can't let that be the case. We know that in Asia and the Pacific, over the next, to achieve our water and sanitation goals till 2040, there is a $150 billion annual gap in financing. So we really need to pool resources between public and private to bridge that gap. And especially in this region when there is so much risk from climate and disaster that's really going to impact communities and their livelihoods. It's something that we need to act on now, and we can't wait. And as I said, utilities and multilateral development banks, we operate on our own time scale, and that can be long sometimes. And so partnering with technology solutions such as Drinkwell makes it, easy for us to implement these solutions in a way that the community can benefit from now instead of years from now. And it doesn't mean that the traditional solutions aren't going to be deployed, but I think it really helps with not making perfect the enemy of the good and making sure that people have access to things that they need right now. So I think one of the most successful things from this story is the merging of the two parallel service delivery models and the de-risking of the pilots, because I think the more that we can work together with partners, the more we can take long-term lasting impacts.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you both. I think this is a great example of how targeted pilots can do more than just prove the technology. They can create the evidence and the partnerships and the trust needed to scale a solution, especially when obviously there is a lot of urgency to scale these solutions for communities on the ground. So thank you both. Please put your hands together again for Manoj and Maria.